Yves Tumor is a producer whose name is supposedly Sean Bowie, and I say supposedly because this guy keeps most elements of his identity completely hidden. The only thing we really know for certain about him is his output, which sort of, I guess, adds to why I connect with this so much. It just makes it feel so much more organic and like he genuinely cares. I didn't know anything about him going into this project, but from what I can tell, he's made music under a few different names, but this is the first time he's gotten this much recognition for something that he's done. And the first music he ever made toyed with elements of noise music, and now he's kind of evolved it into this blend of art pop and experimental pop and neo-psych and post-industrial. This project is an electrifying collage of ideas that's hard to categorize. It's otherworldly, it's twisted, and I think it resembles an emotional downward spiral. I think easily one of the most redeeming qualities about this is the fact that every track introduces something fresh for the album, and yet they share subtle similarities that makes them come together seamlessly when put in an album context. The sound palette uses velvety synth chords, some washed out acoustic guitars, weeping strings, panic-inducing samples, some very cutthroat drum timbres, and there's some clear post-industrial influence in here as well. Some elements of the production remind me of an artist like Coil or Blank Mass, but at the same time there's some clear early 2000s psych pop indie rock influence, even some 90s alt rock sprinkled in there. The vocals are quite washed out and coarse, even occasionally a tad off key, but I don't think that this album would have sounded right with very cleanly produced or polished vocals. And even though the sound palette on some tracks isn't that flashy, what it does has weight, and that's what makes it work so well. To me, it feels like the sonic translation of the end of the world or the death of a soul that's gone numb after years of torment. And even though lyrically it is quite vague, at times it shoves this feeling of general loss into us, like some element of our lives or the world that used to make sense just isn't there anymore. There are a few tangible song topics here and there, like the pain caused by racial tension on Noid or loss of love on Looking in Orchid, but for the most part it doesn't get too specific, and I don't really think that it needs to. I think the songs speak for themselves and people are going to receive this shit differently. But whatever it is, emotionally it strikes me as very stripped of life. Economy of Freedom is a clear highlight for me. It feels like you're in a dark room with all of these different elements just exploding and flashing by your eyes. Through the clouds of smoke, there's this rattling haze of distortion and synths, some very intense drum timbres, and a tortured vocal sample. The first part puts you in a trance, and then the way the drums switch up by the second half feels perfectly calculated, and it moves to this vocal inflection that suggests this sense of brokenness over love. And then we have Noid, whose lyrics have this clear, sporadic sense of panic. It's like being in a trance where all you can see is incoming suffering, and in this case seems to be about police brutality. Its chaotic parts at the end still remaining relatively low in the mix and tightly interwoven into the production makes it feel that much more frightening. Looking in Orchid has this bleeding guitar passage and bass drum. I think James K's vocal here adds a very mournful layer to it, and the crushing distortion by the end genuinely makes it feel like he's losing control because it was preceded by such a minimal and unassuming sound palette, and then all of a sudden it just descends. It also hit me hard where he said some call it pain, some call it torture. Lately I enjoy it because it's like, it's sick, but you get used to the pain, you buy into it, you fall in love with it, which reminds me of a moment off Recognizing the Enemy, where he says, "Inside my own living hell, it means so much to me when I can't recognize myself." On this track, he also suggests the way people grow and change over broken love and are slowly stripped of life, where he repeats, "You look so different, I look so different." And this track pulsates intensely. It's got this haunting guitar loop. It works in some spacier parts with some very skittish strings, a pounding drum that later erupts. Hope and Suffering is one of the most accurate songs portraying agony I've ever heard. Its weight pierces through my fucking heart. I don't feel like I could string together any set of words that would do it justice. The lyrics are so thought-provoking. Even the title tells you so much about it, like escaping oblivion by finding hope in your own suffering. On Lifetime, the drums being so prominent in the mix of what was already such a dense track, and the repetitive nature of the lyrics just adds to how suffocating what he's saying feels, especially in the second half, which is coated with these ambient parts and pianos and strings. Similarly, I think Let the Lioness Flow Through You is an amazing note to end on. The drums on this thing make everything else feel so buried underneath the rubble, and emotionally it feels like such a noticeable change of pace. It's almost like he's trying to overpower all of the pain and everyone who's hurt him all at once. I also love that the last 5 seconds of the song do a complete 180 and introduce this new sample and what sounds like could be the start of a new song, but then just ends as if this album goes on and on and on in some other dimension. My only criticism of this thing is that the blaring horn sample and bass drum hits of the opener don't really set the album off on a very effective foot, and the track ends really awkwardly too, which is not a good place to start. But other than that, this thing is completely free of filler and missteps. And I fucking love this album. The fact that the ideas are so explosive and batshit insane just adds to how detached it feels. You'd only be motivated to make something like this if you were a little bit disconnected from reality. And you know when you listen to an album for the first few times and you can tell that you're gonna remember that moment and it's gonna be important to you, but it's off-putting because it hasn't happened yet and it's still so fresh. An album like this just makes me feel like creative ideas can still happen and things aren't dead. It's been the most vivid emotional experience I've had with a new album all year, which is why it is a 9 out of 10 and my current album of the year. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this review. If you want to like, subscribe, all that cool stuff, feel free, and I'll see you soon.